There's always a threat as we get older that we begin to imagine ourselves to be less relevant, or other people think we're less relevant. And so we get frozen out. And I think AI can be a real tool for keeping us in the game, right? Because it means you're up to date with all of the tech. I mean, there's not going to be anything more on the cutting edge than AI. And if you're playing in the AI game, you're there with everyone else, right? So right away, you're on the same playing field. But I think it can also be a really helpful thing for mentorship. And I think that AI is a super helpful tool for streamlining that, right? For a start, it can take away the boring, menial, managerial stuff, like the kind of scheduling and the taking notes and things. And it leaves more space and time for the deep, rich, slow human stuff. The listening, the sitting together in silence and learning from the silence. What does that silence tell us, right? I mean, AI is never going to go into the silence and tell you what it means, right? But a human being can. That level of analysis and understanding and empathy is what humans bring to the party. Together, you become a transcendent duo.
Hello and welcome to the Conspiracy of Goodness podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Linda Ulrich, and I'm also the founder of the Goodness Exchange. There is an enormous wave of goodness and progress well underway in the world that almost no one knows enough about right now because the news can't share anything with us but doom and gloom. But we're riding that ship at the Goodness Exchange, and on this podcast, we've interviewed well over 200 people who are innovators of the most extraordinary kind. And we're going to interview another one of those folks today. Today, we're going to welcome back a man named Carl Honoré. He is the original champion of the slow movement. You might know his very famous TED Talk from 2005, where he introduced the fact that we were rushing through life and we needed to slow down. And since then, the advent of the slow movement has included slow travel, slow cooking, slow birding, slow learning, just everything you could imagine. And then eventually, Carl started to look at the world in a new way, and he began including a narrative about aging that went with this. He has literally taken on the topic of ageism. We have interviewed Carl on both those topics separately. I'll include those links to those in the show notes. But today we're combining those two and talking about the advent of artificial intelligence. In Carl's book called Bolder, he challenges this outdated notion that he calls the cult of youth. And what we see coming along with the advent of AI is that as we age, we no longer have to suffer any setbacks when it comes to contributing, when it comes to sharing our wisdom and experience. Carl and I talked today specifically about the wonders of how AI is going to level the playing field so we can do things like mentor each other at any age, so that we can share our wisdom and experience, so that we can live better longer, so that we can have perspectives that are constantly up to date. I mean, we go into everything. Carl's insights have been featured in The Economist, Time Magazine, The Guardian, and he contributes to a Substack called Tempo, Carl Honoré's Tempo, that is now my new favorite. A keynote of his has reached 10 million views, and that's not a surprise for me. Today's conversation will challenge the way you think about time, technology, and aging at whatever age you are, and it'll fill you with fresh perspectives that give you a sense of possibility about every stage of life. Welcome, Carl Honoré. I am so glad to chat with you again.
I'm thrilled to be back.
Oh, well, I tell you, every time we chat, when it's even just a friendly chat, you know, I feel like I feel like possibility expands for me.
I have the same feeling.
Well, you know, and don't we just want to hang out with people that do that, right? Like we all have friends where when we're when we're done hanging out, maybe we feel like the world's a little bit smaller, a little bit more fearful, a little bit more dangerous.
Me too.
God bless us all. We're trying to get through this together. Well, Carl, you have some really interesting thoughts about so many things that I think for today's interview, we're going to bring three things together that could be really important in people's lives at any age. But, you know, I've got a daughter downstairs who's 31 and she thinks she's aging. She thinks she's not in touch. She thinks she's... So I don't think our conversation is particular to any age, but it gets more and more relevant once you're over 50. Do you kind of agree this bringing together of AI, the slow movement that you're so brilliant about, and this aging in a more expansive way? Do you think those three topics are probably relevant for anybody?
I do, actually. I think if you drew up a Venn diagram of those three subjects, most of us would fall somewhere in the middle. This overlaps across all generations. We're all grappling with the same buffet of possibilities, but also the same worries and fears. They take different nuances for different generations, I think, and different painterly brushstrokes because we've had different backgrounds and childhoods. But we're all humans, and we're all in the same moment here, I think, in history.
Yeah. Okay, so here's one of the most important things I want to just start with here, because I think it comes from your Substack. Okay, so I mentioned in Carl's introduction, that's something I've just recently gotten turned on to. I've been reading only Seth Godin's Substack and another guy, Bob Glazer. That's the only ones I read, newsletters, Substacks, because I just don't have enough hours in the day. I recently dropped Seth for you.
Oh, God. that counts as the highest praise. I'm honored.
I love Seth, but I love him still too, and I pop back and forth. But getting a newsletter every single day, I tell you, that was making me feel like I couldn't keep up. Yeah. It's a daily sort of relentless stream from that particular newsletter, and as wonderful as it is, it's life-changing often. But yours, you have a lot of so much humor, so much good humor. You make the observations that we're all going, yeah. And you always bring it around to taking us somewhere new in our way of thinking about what we face when we walk out the door.
Yeah, well, that's kind of my aim. I write to entertain myself, to open my mind. I write to work out what I think in a way. So it's a bit of a glimpse into how my brain works. And the idea, I just felt a cold panic go down my spine when you talked about a Substack dropping every day. I just feel like that's you're into fire hose territory there. I'm very much more about letting ideas percolate and marinate and sitting with them and then bringing them out when they're ready. And so I'm more like a 1 or 2 a week kind of guy for that sort of thing.
Well, and I think it's part of this feeling of overwhelm that we've all got. And I mean, Seth's are very short, very to the point. He's like a wordsmith. He says the most you can possibly say in the fewest words. But still, I just couldn't keep up. So now I go and I use it like a touchstone. But all that said, so the other day in your Substack, you said, of course, some parts of aging are hard to love. But that's not the whole story, not by a long shot. The truth is that as we grow older, much stays the same and many things get even better. With the right attitude, later in life can be pretty wonderful. Carl, yeah, that sums it up.
That's it in a nutshell, but isn't that wildly countercultural, that idea? Because we're so bombarded with the cult of youth.
Yes.
And the idea that it's all game over at 40 or downhill from 35, that we fail to see the forest for the trees, right? And yes, we fail to see that there's so many upsides to aging. And
well, and I think it goes counter to what's out there in the world. The messages in the world are so that world's going to hell in a handbasket. That's all you can find. And it just goes right along with that, when you get old, one of the things that we absolutely can't stop, then your life goes to hell as well. I mean, like, it's all those everything's going to hell in a handbasket narratives. It just, the narrative that life gets nothing but worse as you get older, it just fits right in with that. And I think that your work causes us to pause. And it's that little phrase there. But that's not the whole story. Sure, there's stuff that gets harder or more complicated as you get older, but that's not the whole story, not by long shot. That's the line that reeled me in, and I said, "Oh man, this is where we got to sit."
Yeah, it's funny, that line. When I hear you saying it out loud, I realize that really captures a lot of the spirit of my writing. That I'm always taking the world as I see it and rotating it slightly to the left or the right or up or down to get a fresh light and a fresh angle on it. And so often when you do that, what you discover is that's not the whole story, right? That there's another story to tell. And very often there's a much better story to tell than the hell in a handbasket narrative that we're all being pelted with constantly from every angle.
And with my work of the last decade, I can tell you that's absolutely the way the world works. In every story, people are kind of after me these days because I'm not all freaked out. And a lot of my friends are just about the state of the world and everything, politics and so forth. And I'm not, because I know that I don't know the whole story. And I'm a voracious reader of all genres. And that just everything I read teaches me that I know so little and that there's so much more to the story. So let's get on with that. And let's bring in this notion of how AI might be the best thought partner we ever had at any age. That's a big mind shift, because we've been talking about AI in the most fearful manner for at least 5, if not 10 years, right?
There is a lot of fear around AI, as there is around any new technology. That's something that always happened throughout history. But it feels like AI is a category shift, right? The scale of change it's going to bring and the speed at which it's going to bring it, I think, intensifies the emotions that are swirling around it. And the main emotion, I think, for people at the moment is fear. But I would argue that that's not the whole story, right? That if we turn things on their axis just a little bit, we can see that there's a whole other way of unspooling this narrative. And we can see that actually AI, rather than being a menace, can be manna from heaven in lots of different ways, I think, for people of all ages, right? And we'll pick into that further.
So you spent years, challenging the whole speeding along through life, and then this whole notion of decline in aging. Let's talk about it as an amplifier of wisdom first, because that's what we get by aging, that you can't replace any other way. And that's what we get by slowing down, is some wisdom. Talk to us about your thoughts about AI and how it can be this great amplifier of our lived experience and what we learn from it.
I think AI can be an extraordinary wingman, right? We have one of the main benefits of aging is, well, people call it lots of different things, right? Wisdom is the go-to word. I think of it as building up a rich database of experience that allows you to parse and pattern recognize and make sense of how the world slots together. And in order to do that, you need to have data, right? And I think what AI can do is it can bring the data sets along. It can do the fast, heavy lifting. And then what we do is we come along with the slow stuff, which is the letting our minds wander, sitting back, stroking our chins, letting ourselves fall into intuition, joining up the dots, recognizing patterns, all the stuff that takes time and is a little bit woolly and is very hard to accelerate. That kind of, if you think back to Daniel Kahneman, right, and the Nobel Prize winning economist and thinker and so on, his book, Thinking Fast and Slow, there are different kinds of thinking. And fast thinking is very linear and clearly mapped and can be accelerated, right? Ergo fast. But slow thinking is woolly and open-ended and a bit fuzzy, and it exists in that time of uncertainty, that space, that liminal space where you're not quite sure what's happening and if it's taking shape and which way it's going. And I think to be able to play in that space, you need it helps to have an older brain, because older brains are just kind of geared for that sort of thinking. They have that kind of intelligence. You have it at every age, but I think you have an extra edge later in life. So if you're thinking of an older person sitting down with AI in the cockpit right beside them, that is a formidable pairing, right? That is where magic and music happen. And so I feel so optimistic myself. Here I am now, age 57. My brain is just at the sweet spot for using a tool like AI, which is why I and you as well, we're often talking about this off air, aren't we? But how helpful we find AI in our work, in our personal lives. It's just like this extraordinary assistant who's just popped up suddenly and is there to plug the gaps, fill in the blanks for us, but allow us to step back and do the slow cognitive work that we're naturally inclined to do, especially at this age.
That's such a great way to put it. Just last week, I spent some time with a really high-level politician teaching them how to use AI like I have learned to use it. And that's exactly what happened. This person is a little bit older, so they have a wealth of experience. There was so much online that the chat could access. And we were talking about some of the hardest issues and maybe all the volumes of information that she has to read before commenting on the next big problem. And it's just impossible for anybody at any age to get through that material and then talk from a real position of knowledge and authority. And so we took a top issue that was really problematic, and we put it through AI and then asked it to be this person. It was incredible. And, the tone was just right. The voice was just right. The comments, she said, "Oh my God, I've said that before. That's exactly how I thought it. But the next one, no, that next one, that's not right because of this, that. But the third one, oh, I've never thought about it that way." And on we went through the things that chat offered us as fresh thoughts in this really intractable problem area. Well, it only came out that good because she's been around a while.
Yeah, it's the old thing, the output depends on the input. And if you've got a rich reservoir of experience and understanding, you've worked across disciplines, and you go beyond that, right? Because I think what older people bring to the party is a whole panoply of talent and skills. I mean, our social smarts tend to improve, our emotional intelligence sharpens, we get better at leadership, at reading body language, at resolving conflicts, at collaborating, at winning trust, all the stuff that AI so far is really bad at. So it sets up this beautiful dynamic where AI is your perfect dance partner, right? It's kind of offsetting the things that you maybe don't do as well, or don't like doing as much, or don't have the time for, or as you get older and older, even the energy for. AI can pick up that load and do that lifting for you, get it to the point where you then bring all of the stuff that you've built up over the years in your head and can make it sing together.
Okay, so to that point, there's a lot of sharing that has to happen. And that's a two-way street. I mean, we have to be asked, we have to be invited into the boardrooms after a certain age because, remember, you know Chip Conley pretty well, I'm pretty sure.
I do. I've worked with Chip.
Yeah. And I think somewhere there's a mutual connection, maybe with Tanya Carrier, Britt, you and I, who's worked with Chip.
Oh, I know Tanya as well. Yeah, that's right.
I think she's the one who introduced you and I way back. Any case, Chip was only 43 and he was considered the wise elder for the guys, right? For the guys who invented Airbnb. He was brought in because he'd been kind of like the originator of the best part of the boutique hotel movement. So they brought him in at 43 to be the wise elder. So we got to remember that this, what old means is going to be different than to everyone. But talk to us a little bit about the knowledge sharing that AI might be able to advance. Because A, we got to get the invitation to share, and B, I'm sure there's a way that AI can help shift the roles or collaborate or blend.
I think so. Yeah. I mean, the knowledge, thanks to the internet and the web, has been around us for a long time, right? We've been in at least a decade or two where all of human knowledge has been there within a couple of keystrokes. But what AI does, I think, is that it sharpens the whole act of curating it, right? So we can bring the information to us more quickly. And if it can bring it to us, it can take our knowledge and put it out into the world not only more quickly, but in a much more pinpoint, targeted fashion, right? So the knowledge can go out there as a surgical strike. You can get it to the people, the groups, the teams that need it much more in a fine-tuned fashion than I think we were doing with Web 2.0. I think this is a great leap forward. So just as a delivery mechanism and a kind of great librarian in the sky, AI is an incredible ally for marshaling, curating, and getting knowledge out into the places it needs to get to. There's another thing going on here as well, which is one of the things that changes as we get older is this, there's a couple of words for it. People talk about generativity or gerotranscendence, this urge that tends to come across people in the second half of their lives as they get probably into their 40s and so on, where you want to give back, you want to be of service. You've already sponged up a lot of experience, you've got some war wounds, you've been around the block or two, and you don't just want to carry that around as a private thing. You want it out in the world. You want to share it. So it's a useful piece of knowledge for the next generation. You want to help out posterity. And I think AI is an incredible tool for doing that because of the things I just said about the delivery mechanism. But it can also help us create our own libraries, our archives of knowledge, expertise, and wisdom. Now, if you look at the big consulting firms, they've been doing this for years. So everybody in a consulting firm like Accenture and so on, every job they do, they're always told to pull out the knowledge and they put it into a shared database, and that's there that everybody can tap into. What AI allows us to do is to do our own version of that, like a personal individual database where we could be pulling together all of the things we learn, observe, play around with ideas, and put them together into a really useful Babylonic library that holds all of my knowledge, yours, and that becomes an incredibly powerful gift to give to the next generation, to give to the world now as it is.
You're reminding me of something I've got to take care of this afternoon, as soon as we get off the phone. So I interviewed this woman. I was introduced to this woman who is the lead person, the point person who has helped people in the suburbs of Chicago invest over $4 billion in keeping land open. Like Chicago, as cities go in the world, has the most incredible forest systems because of this lady. And, she's just one of those quiet, reserved people, but she had the right background of three things. And for the last 25 years, she's devoted her life to ginning up public support for bonds that preserve land. And it's just changed everything in Chicago as far as forests and open land. And then there's the whole flooding problem when you cover everything with concrete. Well, that doesn't happen in the suburbs of Chicago because they have so much green space. So anyway, she's 76 and no one knows what she knows. Like she is so troubled by the fact that she doesn't have a predecessor. She has all this knowledge. And what you were just talking about, that reminds me that she could literally sit down with a AI program that was good and record her take on things. Like just tell it. And at least there'd be some place, a library, you referred to it, a library of experience that other people, that then AI could help iterate for others.
We already see examples of this. I was at a conference in Mexico a few months ago, and there was a guy he'd worked with Steven Spielberg on the Shoah project, for preserving the testimony of Jewish people who'd been victimized in Europe, of course, in the Nazi era and all that. And what they were using AI to create sort of videos and avatars and so on, so people would speak and tell their story and tell it in any language, in any accent and stuff. So that he's now moved over to a different version of that, which is more sort of not to do with the Holocaust, but just generally and I think that's where we could be. I talked about, libraries and archives and so on, but this could be so much more with AI. It could be so much more real and human because we can create literally talking heads, our own talking head, where someone can go in and ask me or you a question and I can answer in fluent Cantonese, right? or you can do it in fluent Cherokee or whatever, whatever it happens to be, right? And it just think of what that does to sharing of knowledge, wisdom, goodness, right? The energy that can be spread around the world through the human face and the voice, and AI is going to allow us to do that. And we can start doing that from a young age. We can start pulling together our own personal avatar libraries, but think of what you can deliver to the world when you're in that second half of life, right? And it's no longer bottled up or stuck in your back pocket. It's right there for everyone.
One thing I want to remind people of, as I mentioned, I do help people sort of get into this world just because I love it so much myself and how it's working in my life. But one thing I've noticed is that people don't understand that you can have artificial intelligence. I use OpenAI, ChatGPT, because I've got it so finely tuned to my background, to who I am, to how I am. I've tried about 15 and I always come back to OpenAI, ChatGPT. But this notion of being able to ask it to be someone else, people have to understand it's not Google search. And everybody kind of thinks of it that way. So the day after our new president was elected, I recently in November of 2024, I woke up and I asked chat, I said, be Abraham Lincoln and talk to me about the results of this election. Then I asked it to be Gandhi.
Dare I ask what, or do we keep that for an offline conversation?
It's more of an offline conversation because I try and keep politics out of the, but it did make me feel much, much better. And I got through the day. And so I want to remind people that, you can be doing a recipe and have forgotten a completely crazy important ingredient, and you can ask it to be Emerald or whoever, Martha Stewart. I've forgotten this. I'm making this recipe. What would Martha Stewart say to me? Be Martha Stewart and coach me through an alternative. Like, we forget that there's this part that taps back into the wisdom conversation we were having, is that if we make sure that we are actively sharing the wisdom of our experience on some AI format, then people can access us maybe long after we're gone. And that to me is so much potential realized of humanity.
Yeah, that just gives me goosebumps thinking of it. It makes me laugh as well, because you remember a few years back there was a kind of meme going around, and people would say, "What would Beyonce do?" Right? It was a sort of punchline for things. And now you could know what she would do in any circumstance if she created her own wisdom AI database or something, or avatar. And it doesn't just have to be Beyonce. It can be the woman who runs the corner shop down the road, who's maybe got all kinds of insights, or maybe just has one golden insight, but it's out there and it's reachable and we can tap into it, all of us.
Yeah,
and know it from her.
I think it also helps us think about how we don't have to keep starting over and over and over again. I'm noticing now, Carl, when I bring up two people, Gloria Steinem and Carl Sagan, nobody knows who they are.
Wow. Well, that must be a generational thing.
Yes,
right?
It's a generational thing for sure.
Yeah. But to me, they're both icons, right?
Yeah. I mean, Carl Sagan and Gloria Steinem. So instead of forgetting those folks, then what AI can do is AI can help us capitalize on their insights and their genius long after they've been forgotten. We just have to figure out how to connect AI to keeping those kind of folks fresh, top of mind, available.
Yeah.
So, what we're talking about here is it's like an AI can be like an unseen assistant, just like keeping us in the game. Talk to us a little bit about that topic.
Yeah. I mean, it's like, I think of it as the wingman. You could be an assistant. It's just the person who kind of keeps you on the right path, keeps you honest, keeps you plugged in, keeps you relevant, all that sort of thing. I think this particularly because of the ageism we talked about earlier, there's always a threat as we get older that we begin to imagine ourselves to be less relevant, or other people think we're less relevant. And so we get, frozen out. And I think AI can be a real tool for keeping us in the game, right? Because it means you're up to date with all of the tech. I mean, there's not going to be anything more on the cutting edge than AI. And if you're playing in the AI game, you're there with everyone else, right? So right away, you're on the same playing field. But I think it can also be, just moving on a little bit from the idea we were playing with a moment ago about the avatars and the online wisdom sharing and so on. I think it can be a really helpful thing for one-on-one relationships across the generations, right? I think it can supercharge mentorship, because that is another great lever for overcoming ageism, for bringing the generations together, to, tapping our collective understanding and expertise and wisdom. One way to break down the silos between the different age groups is through mentorship, reverse mentorship. And I think that AI is a super helpful tool for streamlining that, right? For a start, it can take away the boring, menial managerial stuff, like the kind of scheduling and the taking notes and the summarizing and things. And it leaves more space and time for the deep, rich, slow human stuff, the listening, sitting together in silence, in an uncomfortable silence sometimes, and learning from the silence. What does that silence tell us, right? I mean, AI is never going to go into the silence and tell you what it means, right? But a human being can. If you ask a question and the person pauses, what does that pause tell you? They skip a beat. What does that tell you? That level of analysis and understanding and empathy is what humans bring to the party. The AI can do the other stuff that is less about the kind of empathy end and can join dots in different sorts of ways. But together, you become a transcendent duo, I think, in the mentorship game, which is, I think, where we all need to be moving, is breaking down these barriers between the generations and talking across the lines. And mentorship's a super healthy, helpful way to do that. An easy, safe way to do it, because it's one-on-one very often. And AI can be right in there, helping both directions.
You're making me think about how much respect is a part of this mentorship. Just the simple respect. Okay, so you look at it, yeah, AI has helped me sort that in two ways. Like, okay, I am no longer asking anybody under 30 in my life how to do things ever on the computer. I just chat is on. It's on my phone. It's there. It's everywhere. It's on every computer. And if I don't know how to do something, I just say, Philippa, I've named my my chat partner. So I just say, Philippa, I need to do this, this, and this. How do I get that done? And if she says something that's a little bit above my pay grade, then I'll say, make it simpler. And she does. And I never have to ask the young people in my life to do anything technology anymore. That's been about a year. And you know what? You get a little bit more respect from a younger generation if you're not always asking for their help on stuff they know darn well you could figure out yourself.
You could figure out, yeah. And AI makes it so easy to figure it out now.
Okay, but it goes the other way too. What I've noticed is when I don't understand the way a person under 25 or 35 thinks, I'm no longer just sitting there hands on hips thinking they're less than, or that they just don't know enough, or all the things that we say when we don't understand a younger generation. I'm asking chat to give me some perspectives I may not have thought of on all kinds of things that come up. And I think that respect part of mentoring can go both ways.
Absolutely. I mean, I think mentoring should always be a two-way street. And reverse mentoring, it seems to me, is always more powerful than just one-way mentoring. I mean, you can, of course, it has its place, one-way mentoring. But I think that the teacher is always elevated by learning, and the pupil is often the best teacher. And so I think if you get away from this dynamic of, especially the older person handing down tablets of stone, you're locked often into stereotypes and old ways and fixed ways of thinking. But when the expertise, the observations, the doubts flow in both directions, I think that just widens the lens and opens space for so much more discovery and wonder and learning, right? And I think to go in, the two of you together, whether it's older, younger, male, female, you just people from different walks of life, I think, can be very helpful as mentors, but particularly that across the generations, younger to older, I think that is, and then older to younger, both directions, super powerful.
Yeah, I think back when, remember when the Bitcoin disaster happened and everybody was making a big deal of the fact that the guy, I think he went to prison, I'm sure he did. It was just such a disaster. And they made it quite a big deal that everybody in the boardroom was under 29 years old.
Yeah.
Right? And they said, if there'd been one person over 40 in there, they probably wouldn't have run down the paths they did, because an older person would have made some mistakes in life and known. Yeah.
It's the old, I mean, of course, you can find people who are wise and are 24, and you can find people who are unwise at 64. There's a lot of variation within the generations, but it is true, generally speaking, that whole ethos of move fast and break things resonates more with the younger audience, right? And it helps to have people in the same team who move slowly and ask whether things should be broken in the first place. And if you have that yin and yang in the same team, then you avoid those mistakes that land you in prison and crash whole economies, right? I think, I'm trying to remember what the number was, but someone did some research looking at the number of people on the Forbes under 30 list and how many of them had ended up in major frauds and so on. And it was quite astonishing how many had, I think it was they'd caused $18 billion collectively in damages. And I don't know how many lawsuits it was. And very often it was because you just had a monoculture, and the monoculture was skewed young, right? It was, again, as you say, it was that whole everybody's under 29 thing.
Yeah. Okay. So we're going to take a break, and when we come back, we're going to talk about the things that Carl is seeing in the future regarding, partnerships and how this AI revolution can make aging a superpower at any age. So let's take a break, and when we come back, we'll talk more with Carl Honoré. You know how the constant negative noise in our digital lives feels like it's reaching a boiling point? Now, many of us have tuned out the news and social media almost entirely. Well, it doesn't have to be that way. There are newsworthy stories about amazing progress, innovation, leaps in human potential, and wonders in the natural world, and they're just not reaching the top of our feeds. We can have access to this, but none of us has the time or maybe even the emotional stamina to search through all the doom and gloom news to find what's right with the world. Okay, enter the Goodness Exchange. There, we are giving instant access to positive news for curious people. Did you hear about the recent Harvard study that found that exposure to just 4 minutes of good news can make you 32% less anxious and 18% more optimistic? Well, I don't know about you, but I need those kind of numbers in my life. So if you want to live with more joy and way less fear, it's really simple. First, you join us at the Goodness Exchange. Everyone around the world has the opportunity to access this kind of content. And we've promised no politics for about a decade, so you're safe from all that distraction as well. Second, you allow this new, more positive, balanced worldview to put a spring in your step again. It can change the way you react to your kids, your coworkers, everybody you come in contact with. And the stories we write about can make you the idea person in your circles. These challenging times call for us to wake up and take control of our perspective. The people who use the Goodness Exchange have the ability to react to the harshness of the world much different because they know way more about what's right with the world. And that's a resource. So subscribe to the Goodness Exchange, our YouTube channel and the podcast, and use this content to live a more expansive worldview. It is still an amazing world out there, and you can be a part of it. Welcome to the Conspiracy of Goodness. Okay, we're back with Carl Honoré. Carl is noted in the world for championing the slow movement. He's now helping us with this whole problem of ageism and the missed potential that society is suffering under when we rule people out once they get to be a certain age, whatever that is. We've already talked in this interview about how 43 can be over the hill. So, Carl, do you see, are you and I ahead of the game with this conversation, or in your business, you do business consulting, right?
Yeah.
Are you already seeing people, like, for instance, okay, just a little sideways. I've always thought this effort to get diversity into business cultures and how much of a big deal people made of it, I've always thought it was so weird that people didn't realize how much better they'd be when they'd have diverse voices all around the table. Like, why do we have to convince anybody that was a thing? Right? Like, yeah. I don't understand. I still don't understand. It does seem
like a bit of a no-brainer, doesn't it?
It's a no-brainer. That the more diverse people you have in the room, the better ideas you're going to get. But anyway, and the same probably applies to experience, right? You need the 27-year-olds who are no holes barred, but you also need the 47-year-old who can say, well, wait a minute, remember this or that, right? But are you seeing that what you and I are talking about is just way out there still, or are there examples of this in the working world? Like, what can we expect in the business world?
Well, I think it's making huge strides from what I can see. I would say even in the last, I was going to say 6 months, but I feel like 3 months, I've seen more and more examples of companies. I think there was a shell shock when the AI thing first landed. first began to get traction, began to look like it was a real thing. And people were flailing around, not quite sure what to do in business. They knew they had to do something, but they didn't know what. And then you had a whole bunch of instant AI experts appearing, offering to be oracles and tell them exactly what to do. And I think some people got stung in those interactions. But I think it's beginning now to settle down, that it's starting to, like, conversations that people are having within companies, on social media and so on. There just seems to be so much more where people are saying, okay, now I can see how AI works in this context. It's going to help me save money here, save time here, do this better there. I mean, even just something you mentioned, you kicked off this segment talking about the very obvious power of diversity and having different ideas on the table and different perspectives in the mix. I kind of feel like AI helps with that, doesn't it, in some ways? I mean, for me, it diversifies my perspective. So if I'm just sitting on my own in the office, playing with an idea or kicking around some stuff, I can go online and read things, but I can also just turn to my AI and say, look, I'm playing with the idea of, I don't know, for sake of argument, what can AI do in the workplace? I can ask AI, which is a bit meta, I realize, as an example. But an AI, it will give me, say, 10 things that AI is now doing or could do, and maybe 7 of them I already knew, but there might be 2 or 3 that I'd never thought of, right? And right away, it diversifies. It's widening the lens. It's bringing a kaleidoscope of experience because, of course, it's tapping everybody's thoughts and writings all around the world. So it's kind of diversity in your pocket in a way.
It is. You and I got started with this line of thinking a couple of weeks ago when I shared with you a piece by the other blogger that I read, Bob Glazer, and he wrote a piece about how the heck do you counsel young people going off to college to pursue majors, because we don't know what even just 5 years will look like. How will AI change the business world? So you tell your kid, do this or do that. Maybe none of us do that, but Bob was really asking some important questions about how we counsel our kids to get their college education. How do you see this applied?
I feel like this is a really difficult moment to know exactly what the right advice to give to a kid going off to college today in 2025 is, because we are in the middle of this. We don't know where it's going to play out. I mean, I heard a fascinating podcast the other day, which suggests that, we could be as close as 2, 3, 4 years away from, general AI, right? Which would just be a total game changer. And then everything needs to be rethought from the ground up. So worrying about what you're going to study at university feels like fiddling at the margins against that kind of revolution. But we're not there yet. But where we are now still feels to me like a time of extraordinary sweeping upheaval. And it's hard when you're in the middle of that maelstrom, it's very hard to be sure about the advice you're giving. The advice I would give at the moment would be 2 things. One would be to study, and this is not just for people going to college now. It's for, you could be maybe leaving a full-time job and going into higher education again at the age of 59, right? And you're thinking, what do I want to study? And I would say, to stay relevant, to stay useful, to stay plugged in, to stay lit up, two criteria. The first is that you study something that you genuinely love, right? That puts some fire in your belly, that you get up in the morning thinking, yeah, I want to know more about this, right? And you're not just ticking boxes and doing the homework and then putting it to one. You are genuinely driven to do it. And then the second thing is, as close as you can stay to higher order thinking, right? So whether it's like mathematics or English literature or the stuff that AI is, I think I'd be like suggesting somebody go off and learn how to computer code right now. I might think, you might want to give that a second thought, because it looks like a lot of the coding will just be done by AI pretty soon, a lot of it already is being done by it. So that may be one where you think that's an easy one to say, give that a miss. But I think as a general principle, keep it higher order thinking, critical analysis, cultural, social angle to things. That's a useful lens, I think.
I think that's really, really important. Some people know my husband and I are both dentists for 30 years. And, AI is being used in dental offices to show you where cavities are in x-rays. Yeah, it's just the obvious thing, right? And it made me think, oh my gosh, I think my last mammogram, I'm hoping my last mammogram was read by an AI, because I get one every year like clockwork. And I would rather an AI mind go through my last one and then compare it to the next one and find something that's a millimeter. rather than a real radiologist who's sipping coffee. Maybe their 14-year-old's driving them crazy and they're thinking about that. And
Yeah.
Facebook is on,
Yeah.
like,
It's no competition. I mean, we're heading for some pretty extraordinary change, aren't we? I mean, yeah. I mean, we're both very optimistic about AI. I think generally I am, but there are some threats, right? There are some things could go wrong. There's no question. We can't be Pollyanna-ish about this. We need to be on our guard. We also need to make sure that the AIs that are getting built are the AIs that we want, right? And I'm not sure if that's necessarily always happening, right? It's very much controlled by, I would call almost a cabal of big tech, right? And do they have our interests at heart? I mean, maybe we get to the point where it goes open source and everyone can create their own AI. We can do it on our own terms then, and that becomes a different game and the rules are different and it's freer and we're closer maybe to the AI we were talking about in the first segment, right? The AI that reflects who we really are because we've designed it.
One thing I want to share with people is that my relationship with ChatGPT got so much better after I customized it. I want to let people know, if they dive into this world after hearing you and I talk, my experience is that you have to pay some, everything free in this world is not really free. It can be burdensome. And so I pay the $20 a month for OpenAI's ChatGPT. And there's a feature there that you can customize it. And to your point about the fear, I have made sure that my virtual assistant knows never to use influencers as sources, always to only use the highest regarded sources when it's searching the web for information. Yesterday I was helping someone understand AI in the scope of healthcare. This is a whole nother thing I'd love you to comment on, because I think a lot of us are feeling like a number in at least the United States in the healthcare system. You're Canadian.
But I live in England.
Okay.
And people feel like numbers here too. I think this is where modern medicine has brought us across the globe, it seems like.
So this executive that I was working with yesterday, he has some serious complications with kidney stones and hyperthyroidism, and it hasn't been able to get any answers from anyone. Your doctor visits are 7 minutes long.
Yeah.
And then there's another complicating factor as well. So, as I was sitting there and trying so hard to make sense of it, do their own research, and has largely given up on the fact that maybe he gets another 7 minutes in a few weeks with the doctor. But so we fed it into ChatGPT there, and came out with the most amazing assessment. And of course, I told it to only refer to the Cleveland Clinic, the Mayo Clinic, and the Harvard School of Medicine. And so I really gave it the sources. I gave it like 6 sources, and he was just blown away by the reams of good data, and he'd done his own homework. So he knew that it was on the right track, and it was putting together all kinds of puzzle pieces for him that the doctors hadn't, and the radiologists hadn't, and this and that. And I just went, oh my God, this changes everything in our medical lives if we can be our own advocates a little bit better. How I have been in this position. The worst thing a doctor can hear from a patient is, well, I looked on the internet and here's what I found.
Exactly.
So I just want people to appreciate the fact that this is not the same as looking at the internet. If you create your parameters, if you are really specific about how you've customized what you want and expect, you can get some really good answers. And I think it's going to help us get through the current craziness in our healthcare systems. Where you have anything to share about that?
Yeah, I mean, I think again, you want to be cautious here because, of course, especially when you're dealing with people's health,
absolutely.
You don't want to be sending people off to do things that could end badly.
Yes, absolutely.
But I think AI is clearly offers extraordinary potential in medicine for helping doctors. And you say, reading X-rays and all that kind of thing. And also helping us as patients, as people, to be part of the conversation, to be well equipped, to know enough to fight to push back if pushing back is the right thing to do in that moment. So I wouldn't want to. I could find it hard to imagine a world. Although who knows, maybe we're heading this way where there are no doctors, right? And we just have AI. That seems like science fiction that we're probably never going to get to. I think doctors will always have a role to play. Human doctors, the human touch,
critical
listening,
thinking, absolutely.
empathy.
Yes.
That's always going to be so important. But I think what we, playing on our optimistic line here, I think where AI can just be this, well, the wingman, right, or the wingwoman, right,
Yes.
in the operating theater or in the Zoom consultation, can just be helping, right, a helping hand, and maybe catching mistakes.
I do want to make sure that people know that I ended that session by saying, okay, our time kind of stopped for him because he was trying to read all this stuff that it came up with so fast. And I didn't want to spend our limited time while him reading. He can do that after we're done. So I said, okay, so here's how you use this now. And we typed in, give me 10 better questions to ask at my doctor's appointment next week. Now that I know this, give me 10 better questions so I can use my time. And that was the game changer, is to make the most of the time that we have with experts, right? If we got our limited 7 and 9 minutes and everybody's just having to fish around in the dark, start with a blank page, because that's what AI helps you not do, is start with a blank page. And then you can fine tune it to get better and better starting point.
I love the idea of asking for better questions. I think that's such a big part of the way I think and work. And I feel like we're often prisoners of certitude. We want answers, right? And we want them instantly. And I think a lot of people come to AI with that expectation. They think, okay, I've got a problem here. I want all the answers. But sometimes what you don't want is an answer. What you want is a better question. And that kind of ties back to what we were discussing earlier about mentorship, that mentorship should be a two-way street rather than tablets of stone, especially from an older person to a younger one. It needs to go in both directions. And when things flow in both directions, it's questions that are driving that. That's the motor. It's not the one person telling the other person how they need to think or do or be. It's asking leading questions. It's asking the right question that leads to another, even better question. And if we bring that same spirit with mentorship that we bring to our relations to AI, I think AI levels up, right? It's just going to deliver so much more. And what better tool to have in your pocket than a little gadget that can help you ask better questions? I mean, that just feels like a gift from the heavens.
It does. It really does. We were both I was even flabbergasted by how that whole thing unfolded. How about staying independent longer? And by independent, it can be anything from how I described, I don't ask the 30-year-olds in my life to do stuff for me anymore. But have you seen this in your aging, your study of aging? Do you see a possibility of staying independent?
I think I do, because before the AI thing really exploded, there was already a push, especially in some of these very advanced age cultures in the Far East, like Japan and South Korea, a move to robots, right? Using robots in the home as companions, as nurses, as waiters, and all this kind of stuff, which seems a little bit creepy, I think, at first. But when you see it in practice, it often works. It's strange. I remember I went to what are we calling them now? A nursing home, or not a nursing, like a third age home, an age for people in the last years of life in the Netherlands. And they were running a program. They had brought in a robot which had early, pretty rudimentary AI, and they found that the residents were speaking more candidly and sharing more about their lives and their worries and their fears and their hopes with the robot than they were with their own families, right? So it may be that, now I wouldn't want the robot to replace people's families and friends, of course not, but it may be that the robot just sits in that ecosystem with better AI now, because I went to that home already now 5 or 6 years ago. Imagine with an AI that could ask better questions, right? And come up with more eye-opening answers and have that embedded in a robot that allows people or invites people or encourages them to be more open than they are with their own family even. I don't want to get into a dystopia where we don't talk to our families anymore, of course not. But, it could be another extra arrow in the quiver. or string
Absolutely.
to the bow.
Okay, I'm going to shift us to something again from your writing in Substack. Because I do want to, I think there's a connection here somehow, and I want to see how your mind works on this. So you wrote recently about how novelty stretches our perception of time and makes things feel longer and richer. And you commented how a lot of us do that with travel. I know that's what I've done my whole life. I've drugged my kids all over the world to the strangest places. And I became like an addict. I love nothing more than that second that you walk into some creepy airport in some faraway place and you don't know anything and you have to start figuring out the culture. It's just okay. But we can't all travel. And certainly when you get older, you have less and less ability to really get the novel kind of travel. So talk to me about what you think AI can add to our daily lives to keep things vibrant. Like, I read a piece the other day about this guy that was super intense about always being, getting maximum efficiency out of everything he did. He would always ask, AI to make sure he went to the absolute best coffee shop and the absolute best, play or whatever it is. And now he's gone the other way. He uses AI to just randomly tell him things to do. So recently he went to a lesson on chasing cats, how you herd cats. And it was given by some folks who are very well-meaning cat people that try and round up stray cats. And so he's actually taken 1 year of his life to use AI to get himself to have weird and variety of experiences. And instead of trying to curate only the best experience, he lets it curate a variety of experiences. So talk to me about how you can envision keeping life vibrant if you can't constantly run into Kathmandu or showing up in wherever.
Well, I mean, this is one of the things, of course, about when it comes to aging well. On my list of commandments for aging well is, and on everyone else's who studies this, is learning, right? To keep on learning. Lifelong learning is not just a business buzzword. It's exposing yourself to new ideas, taking on new experiences, keeps you cognitively sharp, physically fit. It's just good for you, right? And I think AI is a wonderful ally in that. And you just described one way there, in the sense that it serves up this smorgasbord of weird, quirky things to go get your teeth stuck into. It's like having that eccentric friend who says, I know, let's go do this, right? And we've all got a friend like that. And that friend brings so much joy and so much richness and texture to our lives, but that friend isn't always there, whereas AI can be. And so you can have that always at your side, that eccentric friend saying, you know what? You've never done this. Why don't you give this a try? Or let's roll the dice on that. And if you open yourself up to that, I think it's an incredible vista of newness and novelty, which drives, that's what life, that's the spark of life. It's what helps us age well. And that's AI, right? AI can do that if we allow it to.
Carl, I'm on Vermont's largest agency on aging. It's called Age Well. I've been on their board for 5 years. And I'm kind of the person who's always sort of pushing at the future. And we're strategic planning right now. And right now, we still have the largest population of aging people who aren't very tech savvy, but that's going to flip soon. And I don't think we're talking enough about how to serve a population 5 years from now, certainly 10 years from now, that are super tech savvy. How long do you think before the world of over 65 and all the complexities that happen, let's say over 70, you will have a population that's pretty darn tech savvy?
Well, it is coming, of course, because as people, early generations come up, that's just going to happen. But I would argue that it's kind of already happened in a way. And I'm not just saying that anecdotally from my own life, but I saw some stats recently about the number of hours different generations spend online using tech, right? This is the UK, these UK numbers. And the age group that spends the most time online is the age group you would expect. So it's people in their 20s. But the second group in that list who spends the most time online is the drum roll, it's the over 70s. It's not even the over 50s. It's the over 70s, right? Who are spending time on social media, learning, at universities. They're on influencing. They're on there using the tech. Now that's not everybody, but that shows how the dial has moved and the tectonic plates have shifted.
Okay, so there needs to be a bigger vision going forward. So share something with me. Like, I think that what AI has done for me, if I have to really say so, is it's given me more time. I think I shared with you in our pre-call. I'm just trying to throw in things for people in this call, so people this recording, so people know the real scope of how their life can be made better. But my account's been bugging me to write a business plan for the Goodness Exchange for 7 years. And
no one likes to write a business plan.
Yeah, and I've got like spits and spurts and ones that sufficed and all that. So finally the other day, I just said, okay, there's a lot online about the Goodness Exchange, and its predecessor, Ever Widening Circles, was what we called Goodness Exchange until about 5 years ago. So I just asked it. I said, maybe a 60-page business plan for the Goodness Exchange, formerly called the Ever Widening Circles, that will satisfy my accountant. It spit out a 65-page business plan.
Whoa.
I took an hour and a half to polish it up here and polish it up there and make sure this was right. But Carl, it was Goosebump City. If I had sat down and really started trying to do that, it would take me 2 weeks at least.
Yeah.
And so now I got all this extra time. So I pressed send on it, and I tell you, I would have liked to have seen his face when he opened that thing up.
Well, it probably churns up the old conundrum, and this is something we've seen throughout the modern era, that as new technology comes along and helps us do things faster and save time, the big question then is, what do you do with that time, right? Do you double down and try and do more work? Do you create space for thinking, for reflection, for more time for leisure, for being with the people you love? These are big, epic questions we're going to have to start grappling with, because one of the main benefits of AI is that it takes off the busy work, right? It picks off the low-hanging fruit, and that should, for most of us, create more time. So that big question, what are you going to do with your time?
You said something to me the other day that stuck with me. I think we were brushing against this part of the conversation, and you said that you now savor the act of cooking more than you used to.
Yeah.
I'm very interested in this savoring the time that we find.
Well, I think it's a word. I love that word, actually. It's a word I use not a lot, but when I use it, it always gives me a little thrill, because I think it's a forgotten and lost art, the art of savoring. We consume, we experience, we collect, we buy, but all of that is quite superficial, right? Savoring for me is the word that really gets to the core. It gets to the heart of the matter. It gets to the fullness of the experience. And I think that's something that we've sacrificed on the altar of speed. Like if you think of the 4 horsemen of the modern apocalypse, it's speed, busyness, distraction, stimulation, and it's all stuff that's inimical to savoring. We're just racking up experiences. We're ticking boxes. We're multitasking. We're doing 9 things at the same time. You cannot savor when you do that. You have to slow down and give the moment or the task the time and attention it deserves in order to savor it. And I think that's something we tend to get better at as we get older. As a general rule, people find that, you just get a little bit better at focusing on one thing at a time. There's some research showing that we get better at literally savoring the moment. So savoring is something we tend to improve at as we get older. But it's there for everyone, right? It's what makes a life worth living, is the ability to savor the good moments. And for me, cooking that's when I've come from a family of cooks and food people and stuff. So it's always been there for me. But for me, I know that it's the thing I look forward to, just unwinding and being and doing and not rushing. And then the thing that comes afterwards, the sharing. It's my love language, sharing food with the people who matter to me and so on. So yeah, and it's all about savoring with a capital S.
Yes. Okay. So, and that's where your 2 main disciplines kind of overlap. This knowledge base you have about the slow movement and your knowledge about aging better. What haven't we covered? Like, Is there we don't do downsides very often. There are other people are happy to do the downsides of absolutely everything on the internet.
Yeah.
So we don't. But, what would you say if we've gotten people fired up to, my own recommendation is to make sure you be sure you're in open AI chat GPT if you want to just start somewhere. I was counseling a person once, really, really brainy college professor. And gosh, I wasn't paying attention. I was sitting right next to him, and the logo was meant to look just like the ChatGPT logo. And without me quickly picking that up, he accidentally stumbled into downloading a different program. And he got his money back and all that stuff, and we moved on. But it's so, you got to know where to start with this somewhere. So I always tell people, just if you want to get your toe wet, OpenAI ChatGPT is the place to start. But all that said, what are your, if you were, when you talk to people about this, like friends, family, what are some of the cautions that you think are important?
I think the first one is accuracy. I mean, we're early in the AI revolution. AI is not flawless. It's not infallible. It makes mistakes. And sometimes it makes quite spectacular mistakes that you can pick up, that you think, what? And then you call it out, the mistake, and says, oh, I'm terribly sorry, I was wrong. And you think, well, why were you? So it is a little bit strange that way. And it can hallucinate, the phrase they use, the word is, it hallucinates. If it hasn't got the answer, sometimes it will just color in the blanks with made up stuff. So you've got to be on your guard, right? You can't just take it as gospel. I would say that's the first thing to keep front of mind. The second is, this is more woolly, is drawing the line. Because what we don't want to do is have AI do everything for us, right? You want to find the right balance where AI is taking stuff off your plate that, that didn't really nourish you, that was kind of taking up time that didn't need to. You want AI to be doing that sort of stuff. You want not to be leaning on AI as a crutch in every moment. So I think it's important. I think sometimes it's important to maybe just not use AI when maybe yesterday you did use it, and in another circumstance maybe you don't use it, just to keep some of those muscles going. Like people are very afraid of the blank page, right? And AI is great for filling up the blank page, and then you can edit it and stuff. But I personally don't do that, because I think that there's a value in wrestling with the blank page. So personally, in my own use, I will sit there with the blank page and I will work out how to start the piece I'm writing. And then, maybe later on in the process, I'll ask AI to edit. But if I'm doing another kind of writing, which is not so important, I might get AI to do the first draft for me. So it depends. So don't always go straight to AI, I would say. Think about when you're using it, how you're using it, how it's affecting you. Is it leaving space for those muscles to keep firing in your own head? And because you don't want to replace yourself with your own AI. Right? That's not the end game here.
Oh no. Oh no, but that's such a great way to think.
You don't want to make yourself obsolete.
Yes, and I don't want to give people the impression that I use it so often and I hand over. I'm using my critical thinking. For me, that's the thing. It is just a way to get me from A to L, MNOP, and then I still have to do QRS TUV, and it just gets me through the busy work stage of things. And then I still have to turn on the gray cells and really get down. My queries on ChatGPT are usually super long because I'm thinking. I'm trying to give it all kinds of parameters. And
I think that's an excellent piece of advice, is that because it comes back to that question we were tossing around earlier about the power of the right question and finding better questions. And you do that by, when you go with a question to AI or ChatGPT or whatever, you really think, you fire up that critical thinking, you come up with the best question possible, you narrow it down, you streamline it, you hone it, you refine it. And that's cognitive work you're doing there. That's important work. It also will get you better results from the AI. And then you can, once AI has delivered what it is you've asked, then you can then come back to the critical thinking and do the next stage and so on. So you're kind of in that dance again. But you want to be the one I think of it a little bit like, I think another metaphor comes to mind. You remember those? Oh, I don't remember. They still exist, don't they? The motorcycles with the sidecar. Like AI is a little bit like the sidecar. You've still got your hands on the wheel, right? Or the handlebars, right? You're really should be calling the shots. You want to avoid going on autopilot. And it's going to be tempting because as AI gets better and better, the temptation to go on autopilot is going to be very, very rich. Got to resist that. So
that's the analogy. That is the best analogy I've ever heard. That's exactly right. Your hands are still on the steering wheel. You still got to go slow to actually go fast. All the things.
Mm.
Yeah.
You've got this incredible companion riding, shotgun.
Oh, it's just super. Okay. Last thing I want to talk about is how AI could kind of allow us to slip into deeper and deeper delusions. Like it can be an enabler if you don't treat it right. I make a special point, I think, often to ask it to improve my way of thinking. That's my little phrase Philippa is so used to me saying. Here's what I think. Please improve my way of thinking. And I can give you people a tip on that. If you say that to somebody that you're kind of in a little bit of a conflict with in a nice way, oh, I know you can improve my way of thinking. Wow, people like to hear those words. But man, you got to resist the urge to make AI just agree with everything you think and do, and have it test what little you do actually know.
That's definitely something that I do when I ask it to look over something I've written or edit, or I always say, I don't use the phrase improve my thinking, but it's a similar thing. I'll say, tell me what the other side would say, or something like that, right? Imagine you're a critic who wants to take this down. Yes. What are all the holes in this argument? What are the counter arguments? Pull it to pieces for me. Yeah. And that pulls you out of silos, gets you out of the echo chambers that we can find ourselves sliding into so easily on the internet these days. And it widens your view, and it allows you to join the dots, and it also sharpens your thinking, right? Because you've gone through the crucible of critique, and AI can be a wonderful companion and partner for that.
I love that. The crucible of critique. Let's not forget to use it like that. That is lovely, because it's so much. I do that from time to time, but it's so much easier to hear than it would be for my husband. Right? Yeah. If I say, Chuck, what do you think of this? And then I'm going to be, and he knows, how far, but
you don't have any baggage with Philippa, right? No, there's no, that's right. There's no, she doesn't have skin in the game.
Yes. Okay. So I always wrap up these interviews with a few questions. So Carl, you're out there on the edge, on the cutting edges of so many things. When I look back at your slow movement TED Talk, the one I encourage everybody to Google next to your name, that was like 2006, 2007. You were
2005 even.
5.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's 20 years old this year, which is pretty amazing.
You were so far ahead of the curve. What do you see now? Like, have you heard of Malcolm Gladwell's recent book? He wrote The Tipping Point. Mm-hmm. Now he's written The Tipping Point Revisited, I think it's called. I can't remember. I've read it. And he's looking at what he talked about in that very famous book, now 25 years later. Talk to us about this.
Well, I'm sort of toying with the idea of doing a similar thing myself. I've been kicking around the notion of writing a sort of where is slow now, and how does it compute in a world of AI, climate change, all these things that are going on that weren't really happening in the same sort of way, phones, social media, all these things that have completely changed the landscape. I haven't gone deep yet because I'm still on the edges of the idea, but my gut sense is that the principle of slow is still holds, right? The idea of finding the right pace, finding the right rhythm. Sometimes you got to go fast, but sometimes you got to slow things down, and giving your full attention to things. I mean, there's a lot of talk about the attention economy now. That's another lens you can bring to the same subject. So yeah, I guess I'm sort of in the foothills of putting together what might be the next book on that subject, but I'm feeling myself in a little bit of a holding pattern, because I do feel that with AI, we don't really know yet. I mean, it's kind of, we have had a great leap forward, but I've got a sense that a really epic leap is coming very soon. And to start writing, I guess, I could start writing if it came, I'd change, but I feel it feels too soon to be sure about I'm not sure what I think yet. I guess I'm still in that stage of finding better questions. I don't think I have enough answers yet to put it all down as the kind of book that I write, which does answer, it does have questions, but it has some answers in there as well. I feel like the balance between questions and answers is very much tipped towards questions at the moment, which is exciting, right? It's an exciting time, also unnerving. And yeah, I mean, who knows where we'll be? It could be, just the other day, I noticed a headline that whooshed across my screen, and then I never heard anything more about it. It said that researchers at Microsoft have found a new form of matter that they were using to supercharge their quantum computers.
I saw that too. And then I haven't heard anything about it.
It's like some kind of science fiction story. And then it just didn't even get picked up. It was there as a headline. It was gone and nothing. Yeah. And you think when you're living in a world where something like that isn't shaking the table up and down, then you're in the middle of a time of just remarkable upheaval, and it's hard to know what's coming. Anyway, that's a slightly waffly answer to say I don't know where we're going.
No, I think you're absolutely right, but it circles me back to the question that I usually like to end on. Given that, and that we've married these three subjects quite a bit here today, what do you really wish people knew? Like when you do look at the news, or you do see the trouble in the world, or, you have your own sense of overwhelm, like so many of us have, do you ever just put your face in your hands and just because of your life experience and the topics that you're well versed in, is there anything you really wish people knew that would be helpful in this phase that we're in?
Yeah, I feel there's a few things, but the thing that I would put on the table now is that I think that most people are basically good, right? They're well-intentioned. They want to do the right thing. They want to do right by other people. I think that's the basic human impulse. That's how we've got to where we are, right? Thousands of years on of civilization, we wouldn't have got this far. Now, there are other impulses, of course, and there are systems that distort and push us in the wrong direction. And we are not perfect. We are not paragons, of course not. But I think how's that for, the arc of history bends towards justice and all that. I do think the arc of humanity bends towards goodness, right? Goodness being something, the goodness exchange. Here we are in the right context and forum to be saying this out loud. But I do think that's something that keeps me going, is that, and especially in these times that are so dark and shadowy, that to know that there is a trembling flame of goodness there. And if we just, cup it and give it the space to grow and feed it, it can turn into a big, large bonfire that's going to warm all of us. And that's what keeps me going.
And I'd like to add that it's people like you who are carrying that lantern. You're willing to be out there ahead of the curve. You're willing to put forward ideas that seem foreign. You're going against the grain every time you assert yourself into culture.
Yeah. I've definitely got a bit of a contrarian streak, which is funny because I'm actually a very gregarious person. I love getting along. I love sitting around the table and joking with people and having dinner. But I do when it comes to ideas, I definitely, if I see a consensus, my natural instinct is to turn around on the side and try and find the clay feet, right? and challenge it. So yeah, that's clearly, that's my MO. I just can't get away from it. So it's always the way I do things.
All right. So as we wrap up here, self-promote. Like, the world needs your opinions. We need to know more about these topics. Where can people find you? Is there folks that can hire you for things? Like, what are we talking about? Yeah. Your interaction with the world?
Well, I'm on all the social media and so on. I'm very easy to find. All my links are on my full name, carlhonoré.info. And there you will find, videos, courses, books, every single thing you could ever want to know, probably more about me. I've got the Substack that I've launched recently, which you were very kindly singing the praises of, which is called Tempo. And that's under my name, Carl Honoré, it's Tempo. And that's where I'm doing a lot of my more interesting writing and thinking now. It's also where I've curated a lot of my video and stuff. So all the videos that you could want to watch are up there. And then I go out into the world and I do talks, I do workshops, I do them all over the world. And I love getting in front of people, and I love learning from people, and it just, I love travel. We talked about travel earlier as well. So these things all meld together beautifully. And so I'd like to take ideas out into the world and get people thinking differently.
Okay, and all that Carl just turned us on to, and then anything you've heard Carl and I mention will be in the article on the Goodness Exchange about this interview. So not on where you get your podcasts at, but over on the actual website that's free for the world, the Goodness Exchange. If you go to the Conspiracy of Goodness podcast there, you'll see Carl's episode and a huge, quite large article that we'll write, and we'll include all the links to everything we've talked about. I wanted to share with people that if this whole AI thing is just way, way, way early for you, I did 2 episodes, and I very rarely do 2, episode 199 and 200. I really feel like this is the way we're going. So I kind of memorialized this as for episode 199 and 200 with an amazing guy who works with companies all over the world to explain the advantages of artificial intelligence, Arthur Zards. So in the first episode, we talk about why AI is important. And in the second one, the 200, we actually walk you through exactly how you get started. So if people are intrigued by what Carl's shared with us today and can see the benefits there, head over to the Goodness Exchange and look at Arthur Zard's episodes 199 and 200. Okay, well, Carl, we are going to keep a close eye on your work, and I'm sure you'll be back again. This is actually my 3rd interview with Carl, and I'll be sure to put the other 2 up on the Goodness Exchange article so people can find your very specific conversation about the slow movement, and then the very specific conversation we had about aging. Thank you so much for joining us and sharing this lantern you're carrying for hope in this particular niche. It's just lovely.
Thank you very much. It's always such a pleasure to chat with you. You give me better questions to ask.
Well, we'll just leave everybody with that.
Greatest gift. Thank you, Linda.
All right. Thank you so much. Bye-bye, everybody. Have a great week.